The point is, if people are getting in your way, especially some directors,
Yes.
you know. I worked with a director once in True Grit way back. He didn't say it to me, he said it to another. When I say action, tense up, goddammit. Can you imagine a guy coming in here, your boss, saying tense up when you do this? That's the worst thing you can say to an actor.
He stayed quiet for 6 decades. Now at 94, Robert Duvall is finished with diplomacy. The actor known for restraint finally names 4 colleagues he could not stand, conflicts that bent scenes, rewrote shooting days, and in subtle ways, redirected films now treated as sacred. No tirades, no theatrics, just a calm ledger from someone whose legacy is beyond negotiation. The impulse wasn't revenge, but accuracy. Tributes had polished tension into chemistry, rivalry into mutual respect. Duvall remembered lines stepped on, takes quietly sabotaged, phone calls that shifted casting, edits that changed emphasis. The names arrive without flourish, the lessons arrive with them. Dustin Hoffman. Before the posters and premieres, there was a small apartment in New York where 2 young actors rehearsed until the walls felt thinner than paper. Robert Duvall and Dustin Hoffman traded scenes, swapped ideas, and tried to will auditions into paychecks. Hunger sharpened everything. So did proximity. In that close air, generosity and ownership began to blur. He would grind for weeks on a take, tempo, breath, the way a vowel lands when a character is lying, and try it out in the apartment. Soon after, Hoffman walked into the same audition and unveiled the same rhythm, the same phrasing, almost down to the pause before a crucial line. When he booked it, he called the overlap inspiration. The word sounded civilized. To Duvall, it sounded like a receipt. The pattern didn't end when both men found traction. During the late 60s, while Duvall was carving out outlaws and men with quiet, watchful cores, Hoffman rang often for advice. Voice work, a physical tick that makes a sickly character read true under light. How to keep a limp credible from shot 1 to shot 30 when scenes rarely shoot in order. Duvall answered, he always did. Then came interviews in which the origin stories changed. Suddenly the voice arrived after months of street observation, the limp from a sudden epiphany on a subway platform. The privacy of process turned into a public myth with no forwarding address. Competition hardened into something colder during a clutch casting race. The role at stake could have reset a trajectory. Duvall heard later that a director was warned off him, told he was difficult, told he broke rhythm on set and soured rooms. The messenger, he was told, was Hoffman. That crossed the line from opportunism into sabotage. Calls stopped being returned. Old warmth cooled into professional weather. None of this erupted in tabloids because Duvall refused the easy spectacle. On panels, he praised Hoffman's best work. On red carpets, he shook hands, posed, moved on. Silence wasn't consent. It was policy. Protect the craft first. Let the calendar do the talking. The cost wasn't only emotional. Perception shifts casting. Casting shifts history. An actor tagged as difficult sees fewer doors, or different ones, the roles tilting toward supporting parts that require discipline but concede profile. Duvall carved meaning from that tilt, refining stillness into a blade. The work kept deepening. The spotlight stayed selective. Resentment never drove the performance. Precision did. Years later, the apartment is gone, the city remade, and the careers carved into stone. What remains from that narrow hallway of youth is a boundary. Share the craft, protect the origin. For Duvall, that line, drawn in a cramped New York room and enforced for a lifetime, never faded. Marlon Brando, genius, in certain rooms behaves like weather. It rolls in, changes temperature, and dares everyone else to breathe differently. On The Chase, Brando was the storm front. The work could be dazzling, flashes of truth that made the camera lean forward, but the path to those flashes carved trenches through the day. He shifted readings from take to take, not for discovery's sake, but to make continuity a moving target. If a director's plan didn't suit him, the plan lost. If another actor's moment gathered heat, a stray sound off camera, barely audible to the ear and fatal to a microphone, could reset the board. It looked like mischief. It landed like control. Duvall carried an ethic that prized steadiness. Same spine, same aim, each take. Craft is a promise kept to your partners. The game's graded. The crucial monologue arrived, the kind of scene an actor builds a week around, and the noises started, small as a coin on a table, always just enough to force another reset. After the 5th ruined take, the confrontation came. Brando smiled, a master's smile, and offered a sentence shaped like advice. Be stronger in your choices. The message underneath was colder. If the room belongs to a gravity this strong, everyone else is responsible for not getting pulled under. Admiration didn't evaporate. It bent. Brando's presence remained a classroom: risk deeper, listen harder, let stillness vibrate. But the lesson arrived with a second clause: genius doesn't absolve collateral damage. A set is an ecosystem. One person's improvisation can be another person's lost day, and lost days have a way of showing up in budgets, tempers, and edits. Duvall recalibrated. He tightened his preparation until it clicked like a lock. He pared away anything ornamental, refused to chase the weather, and built performances that could hold shape no matter how many winds shifted around them. The industry loved the pairing in publicity shots and myth. It loved the idea that proximity to the brightest star proves elevation. What Duvall learned instead was distance, enough to keep respect intact and dependence out of reach. Later, their names would share a marquee again in the same universe without sharing a frame, a scheduling reality that doubled as a quiet mercy. No feud posters, no public lecture, just a private ledger that balanced admiration with resolve. Decades later, when tributes tried to retell the era as pure alchemy, he could still hear the tiny off-camera noises and feel the weight of a reset that didn't need to happen. He could admire the brilliance and name the cost. In the arithmetic of long careers, that clarity matters. It kept the work honest, fixed the compass when charisma threatened to tilt it, and drew a boundary that would guide every negotiation that followed. Respect the talent, refuse the damage, and leave the day stronger than you found it. James Caan. Competition can light a scene. It can also scorch a set. From first rehearsals on The Godfather, the current ran hot. One actor built his work in silence and precision, the other in kinetic bursts that tested margins. Lines were measured, then jostled. Business appeared in the frame. Hands, props, a sudden shift in posture, each a small magnet tugging attention away from the lawyer who ran the room from a chair. What read as lived-in chaos on screen began, for Duvall to feel like strategy. The family council sequence became the center of gravity for that tension. The table is long, the stakes immediate, and Tom Hagen's calm is supposed to cut through heat. Between takes, Duvall and the director tuned motivations like strings. The interruption arrived casual and sharp, a joke that landed like a slight about overthinking a secretary. It wasn't the first dig, it was the one that set the boundary. Duvall adjusted, not the performance itself, but the angle of observation. If Sonny Corleone was going to explode, Tom Hagen would watch him closer. If a co-star tried to pull the frame wider, Tom would narrow the lens with stillness that refused to yield. The dynamic didn't flare into public spectacle, it calcified into a system. Give the scene what it needs, deny the bait, let the camera choose. Upstaging tricks have half-lives, clean choices do not. Duvall learned to make the silence active, to turn a listening face into narrative pressure. On playback, the eye keeps returning to the stillness, because it suggests judgment, strategy, consequence. The louder choice wins the moment, the truer one wins the edit. The cost of that kind of competitiveness isn't only bruised pride, it pushes crews late, it frays concentration, it risks a split-second look to camera, or a mismatched eyeline that an editor has to bury under a cutaway. Duvall's answer was a craftsman's answer: consistency as a countermeasure. Hit the mark with the same temperature. Keep the logic of the line intact from shot to shot. Offer the production something that survives every angle. When currents turned choppy, reliability became leverage. Offset, the weather cooled to indifferent professionalism. Press tours smiled. Anniversaries reunited casts in careful warmth. The work's importance overruled the urge to litigate slights. Duvall didn't rewrite history to insert a feud. He simply refused to forget the arithmetic of that room. In the long math of a career, those days clarified a policy: competition is welcome until it distorts the story. Years later, when people describe that ensemble as seamless, the word misses something essential. The seams are there, the stitching is the point. Duvall's stitching held. He took rivalry, translated it into vigilance, and fed the camera a calm that reads, even now, as power. The performance didn't blink. The film kept its shape. And a private decision, never to chase attention, only to command it, became part of a signature that outlasted the heat of any room. Robert Redford. Public image can act like varnish. Smooth, luminous, protective. On the natural, the shine was part of the allure. Robert Redford embodied the myth: noble profile, clean lines, a kind of American inevitability, and the production bent around that center. Across from him, Duvall carried a different instrument: Max Mercy, the reporter who punctures legends by writing what the crowd refuses to see. The roles set the terms before the first slate. The friction didn't announce itself as fireworks. It bled in through logistics, waits that stretched, mornings that slid into afternoons while calls were taken and priorities reordered. Crews idled, departments recalculated. None of it looked hostile on paper. It read as importance asserting itself, a reminder that the axis of a day can tilt to accommodate a brand. Duvall logged the pattern without dramatics and adjusted his approach. Precision in windows, readiness on short notice, performance calibrated to cut through whatever glare surrounded the hero's arc. Then came the shaping forces no actor controls, the pages that get nudged, the beats that go quiet, the scenes that shrink in the assembly because the film decides to serve its son. Max Mercy works best as pressure, ink that stains myth, so every reduction changes weight. Duvall understood edits not as verdicts on performance, but as declarations of emphasis. The cut tells the audience where to look. The job is to give the cut no excuse to look away. He sharpened Mercy until even trimmed beats carried an aftertaste, a glance that implies a file already open, a half smile that reads like a headline drafted before the first pitch. The clash that did surface was about hierarchy, not volume. The message received: movie star rules are different. Frame dominance isn't personal, it's structural. The paradox is that the structure then becomes personal for everyone else who has to work inside it. A reporter character designed to challenge a legend can't challenge much if the legend's gravity devours oxygen. Duvall's solution wasn't complaint, it was density. Pack more meaning into less time. Let the cadence of a question feel like an indictment. Make every syllable do the work of three. Behind the scenes, ideals and practice diverged. Public platforms celebrated artistic purity, community, the elevation of peers. On set, leverage dictated pace and balance. Duvall's ledger didn't moralize, it measured. What delays cost, what trimming does, how a single note to a director can ripple through an ensemble until an entire subplot becomes a whisper. He kept the page clean and the memory exact, because clarity is its own kind of power when the room prefers haze. The result on screen is graceful, even lyrical. None of the choreography shows its bruises. That was the point: protect the film in public, fix the compass in private. Duvall sustained Max Mercy as a pressure system felt even when absent, an intelligence that hangs over Hobbes's triumph like weather-threatening rain. The audience may not count the lost minutes, but it senses the reporter's outline in the way the myth keeps having to prove itself again and again. Years later, the legend of the natural remains intact, all golden dusk and earned catharsis. The map Duvall carries from it is different, a record of how power behaves when it feels inevitable, and a method for keeping integrity measurable when nothing else is. The reporter inside the story wrote about heroes, the actor inside the set wrote about systems. One exposes myths on the page, the other survives them in the work. The fallout. Friction leaves marks you can't see in the poster. It hides in call sheets that stretch, in lunch breaks that drift, in a director's eyes scanning for a fix that doesn't live in the script. When days ballooned, crews learned to budget patience as if it were gear. When scenes warped around personalities, editors inherited the bill, mining coverage for continuity, searching reactions to weld performances that wouldn't naturally sit together. The finished films look inevitable, the path there rarely was. Reputation moved like weather across town. A whisper about being difficult, adjusted what doors opened, and what chairs were offered inside those rooms. Invitations arrived with limits embedded in them, supporting roles that needed discipline, scenes designed to carry intelligence without spectacle. Duvall took those limits and made them load-bearing. If the frame wanted flash elsewhere, he built the kind of performance that quietly holds the roof. Budgets feel friction in numbers. 5 resets over a stray noise translate into overtime, and overtime compounds into schedule compression that steals rehearsal from another department on another day. A trimmed roll doesn't just reduce screen minutes, it erases connective tissue that keeps a story legible. The audience may not notice the surgery, but actors feel the scar. A beat that used to justify a look is gone, so the look must carry a new weight without collapsing under it. Power expresses itself in tiny, repeatable ways. A phone that must be answered while 100 people wait becomes an organizational principle. A note that softly shapes another actor's footprint becomes precedent. Policies are written to accommodate the pattern, and soon the pattern reads like nature. Duvall kept a private ledger of those habits, not to nurse grievances, but to understand the system he had to negotiate every time the stakes were high and the clock louder than the script. Craft adapted. He learned to make the first clean take his standard, not his warm-up, because windows can close mid-morning for reasons no one will put in writing. He built speeches with internal seams so they could survive a cut without losing argument. He trained stillness to signal plot rather than passivity, turning silence into a tool editors could rely on when they needed an anchor. Reliability stopped being politeness and became leverage. Publicly, the machine smoothed its edges. Panels, retrospectives, reunion specials, each event filed tension down to talking points. The story hardened into harmony, because harmony photographs better. Privately, Actors who had lived through the same rooms recognized the outlines. They understood that a set can be both collaborative and territorial, that a masterpiece can contain a trail of compromises measured in half pages and altered eye lines. The audience's memory tends to keep the music and forget the metronome. What remains in the work Duvall left is the metronome, tempo you can trust, a rhythm that the rest of the scene calibrates to whether it wants to or not. When a co-star pursued combustion, he offered containment. When image demanded deference, he answered with density. When days slipped, he arrived already inside the beat. The fallout in his case was converted into form. Why now? Late style invites honesty. Accolades quiet the old anxieties, and the calendar makes selectivity feel like duty. After years of retrospectives that pressed conflict into folklore, Duvall chose to replace the montage with minutes. What days actually felt like, how choices were cornered, where the work bent to pressures no press kit names. The motive wasn't spectacle, it was housekeeping. Tributes had started to sound interchangeable. Chemistry, camaraderie, destiny. In that gloss, he heard missing variables, weights that turned into policy, phone calls that rearranged casts, edits that shrank arguments into gestures. Memory, left alone, becomes myth. Testimony arrests the drift. He spoke to anchor the facts before they were too smooth to recognize. There is legacy management in the decision, but not the defensive kind. Accuracy safeguards the craft that bears his name. If the record shows only ease, then the method looks accidental and the discipline invisible. By putting the seam work back on the page, the patience, the boundary setting, the insistence on first-take readiness, he restores the invisible architecture that made the performances durable. Mentorship sits beside legacy. Young actors are handed tales of genius and harmony, then walk onto sets ruled by leverage and time. They need maps that mark the real hazards, the seduction of noise, the cost of lateness, the way a single note can tilt an edit. Duvall's account turns private coping mechanisms into communal tools. Prepare deeper, speak smaller, let the work carry the argument. There's also a mercy in saying it while names are still alive. Praise can be specific, criticism can be proportionate, the tone can be level, the examples precise, the conclusions limited to what happened and what it cost. That restraint models a kind of candor that doesn't require a bonfire to produce light. 4 names do not shrink a career, they illuminate it. The collisions mattered, but they did not define the work. Discipline did. Out of rooms tilted by ego, schedule, and leverage came performances that hold their shape decades later. Choices built for the edit, listening sharpened into pressure, stillness engineered to carry argument. The record is cleaner when the seams show. The films aren't smaller for knowing the cost. They're sharper, more human, and easier to honor without pretending the weather was always fair. In the end, the list isn't a grudge, it's a glossary. It translates how power behaves on sets, and how craft survives it. That is the gift of late candor, a working map from someone who walked the long road and left the landmarks intact. If this resonated, save, share, and comment down below.